I am John, 28 years old, and the day my parents kicked me out was the day I truly began to live. All because I refused to follow my brother into medicine. "You are throwing your life away," my father had shouted as I packed my bags. 7 years later, they watched my brother's medical career crumble while my tech company flourished. Now they want my help. I simply said no. If you are watching this, let me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey, from family outcast to successful entrepreneur. Growing up in a traditional Asian American household, expectations were always crystal clear. My parents had immigrated to America when I was just 3, leaving behind everything they knew in search of better opportunities. They worked tirelessly, my father taking double shifts at the hospital as a medical technician, my mother cleaning houses during the day and sewing garments at night. Their sacrifice had one purpose: to ensure their children would achieve the American dream they never could. My brother Marcus was 5 years older than me and had always been the golden child. From an early age, he showed aptitude in mathematics and science, bringing home perfect report cards that our parents proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Each achievement of his was celebrated with special dinners and proud phone calls to relatives back home. "Our son will be a doctor someday," they would announce, their voices swelling with pride. While I shared our apartment with Marcus, it often felt like we lived in different worlds. My parents spared no expense when it came to his education. They enrolled him in the best private schools, hired tutors when he struggled with advanced chemistry, and even took second mortgages to pay for his SAT prep courses and college applications. Meanwhile, I attended the local public school, where resources were limited and classrooms were overcrowded. "Your brother is paving the way," my mother would often tell me. "You just need to follow his footsteps." This became the unofficial family motto. Every academic achievement of mine was measured against his, and even when I excelled, the praise was always tempered with comparisons. "Good job on your science fair project, John. Marcus won first place when he was your age, but second place is still nice." The pressure to perform academically intensified as I entered high school. My parents scheduled my life around academic success: extra math classes on Saturdays, science camps during summer breaks, and mandatory study hours each evening. Social activities were considered distractions, and friendships were evaluated based on whether the other kids had similar academic goals. What my parents never understood was that while I was capable in science and math, my passion lay elsewhere. I discovered digital art in my sophomore year when our school got a new computer lab. While other students used the computers for research papers, I stayed after hours learning design software and creating digital illustrations. The computer lab became my sanctuary, the one place where I could breathe and create without judgment. "This is just a hobby," my father dismissed when I showed him a digital animation I had spent weeks perfecting. "Art will not put food on your table. Medicine, that is a real career." My mother was slightly gentler but equally dismissive. "It is nice that you have creative talents, but those are for spare time, not for serious study." The pinnacle of family pride came when Marcus received his acceptance letter to medical school. Our small apartment transformed for the celebration. Relatives flew in traditional foods, were prepared for days, and my parents beamed with a happiness I rarely witnessed. During the party, my uncle pulled me aside and patted my shoulder. "Soon it will be your turn," he said, with absolute certainty. That night, as the celebration continued downstairs, I sat alone in my room scrolling through design school websites on a laptop I had saved for by working weekends at a local grocery store. I allowed myself to imagine a different future, one where I followed my own path instead of walking in Marcus's shadow. It was a dangerous thought, but once it took root, it refused to die. Throughout my senior year of high school, I maintained the facade of the dutiful son, excelling in AP biology and chemistry, while secretly building a portfolio of digital designs. I applied to the colleges my parents selected, all with strong pre-med programs, but also sent applications to schools with renowned digital arts and technology departments. I kept these additional applications hidden, paying the fees with money I earned from my part-time job. When acceptance letters arrived, I hid several from art and design programs, knowing the time wasn't right to reveal my true ambitions. Instead, I focused on the letter from my parents' top choice, a prestigious university known for sending graduates to top medical schools. The scholarship they offered made my parents proud, and for a moment, I let myself believe that perhaps I could endure 4 years of pre-med education to make them happy. As high school graduation approached, I watched Marcus return home for brief visits, noticing the darkening circles under his eyes and his increasingly short temper. Medical school is demanding, my parents explained, never questioning whether he was truly happy. I wondered if that exhaustion and frustration would be my future too, but kept these thoughts to myself, holding on to the small hope that perhaps after college I could finally pursue my own dreams. The first semester of college hit me like a freight train. While I had always been a good student, the intensity of pre-med courses at an elite university was overwhelming. My introduction to organic chemistry professor made it clear on the first day, look to your left, look to your right. Only one of you will make it to medical school. The competitive atmosphere was suffocating, with students sabotaging each other and refusing to share notes or study together. Each night I called home with updates on my coursework, and my parents responded with stories about Marcus's progress in medical school. He is doing his first clinical rotations now. My mother would say, her voice filled with pride. Think about how proud you will feel when you reach that point. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a physical force. The turning point came during my second semester. Needing to fulfill an elective requirement, I registered for Introduction to Digital Design, assuming it would be an easy break from my science-heavy schedule. On the first day, Professor Gary Williams walked into the classroom, a former Silicon Valley designer who had left the tech world to teach. Unlike my other professors who lectured from behind podiums, Gary moved through the room, engaging with each student individually. Design isn't about making things pretty, he told us. It's about solving problems through visual communication. For our first assignment, he challenged us to redesign a medical information form to make it more intuitive for elderly patients. For the first time in months, I felt truly engaged in my schoolwork. I stayed up all night redesigning the form, incorporating color coding and simplified language while maintaining all the necessary medical information. When I presented my design to the class, Gary stopped and studied it carefully. You have a natural understanding of user experience, he said. Most beginning students focus on aesthetics, but you've focused on functionality while maintaining visual appeal. After class, he asked me to stay behind. Are you a design major? No, I admitted. Pre-med. He raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you're on the right path? Because what I saw today shows remarkable talent in a completely different direction. That 15-minute conversation shook the foundation of everything I had accepted about my future. Over the next few weeks, I found myself spending more time on design projects than studying for my science courses. My grades in organic chemistry and physics began to slip, but for the first time, I didn't feel panic at the thought of disappointing my parents. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar, genuine enthusiasm for my education. Gary became an unofficial mentor, lending me books on user interface design and introducing me to software I had never encountered. He showed me how design and technology were merging in revolutionary ways, particularly in the emerging field of artificial intelligence interfaces. The most sophisticated AI in the world is useless if humans can't interact with it effectively, he explained. That's where designers like you come in. By mid-semester, I had made my decision. After a particularly enlightening lecture on designing digital experiences for healthcare applications, I visited the academic advisor's office and officially changed my major to digital design, with a focus on human-computer interaction. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming, like setting down a heavy backpack I had been carrying for years. Telling my parents was another matter entirely. For weeks, I rehearsed what I would say, preparing counter-arguments for the objections I knew would come. Finally, during spring break, I returned home prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. The opportunity came during dinner on my second night home. Marcus was absent, having remained at medical school to prepare for an important exam. My father asked about my organic chemistry grade, and instead of lying, I took a deep breath and spoke the truth. I've changed my major. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm now studying digital design and technology, with a focus on artificial intelligence interfaces. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's face transformed from confusion to disbelief, and finally settled on anger. "This is a joke," he said flatly. "You cannot throw away everything we have worked for because of some silly computer drawings." I tried explaining the growing demand for designers in the tech industry, the salary potential, the creative fulfillment, but my words seemed to bounce off an invisible wall. My mother began to cry, silently dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Do you know how much we have sacrificed?" My father's voice rose with each word. "We left our country, our family work jobs, beneath our education level, all so you could have opportunities we never had. And you repay us by throwing it all away on a hobby." "It's not a hobby," I insisted. "It's a legitimate career with incredible potential. The tech industry is... Drawing pictures on computers is not a real job," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Your brother understands responsibility. He understands honoring family. What do you understand except selfishness?" The argument escalated from there. My father threatened to cut off all financial support if I didn't return to the pre-med track. My mother pleaded through tears, asking why I wanted to hurt them this way. Neither of them actually listened to anything I said about my talents, interests, or the legitimacy of my chosen field. The breaking point came when my father looked me directly in the eyes and said the words that would echo in my mind for years to come. "You are throwing your life away. You will end up a failure, and it will be no one's fault but your own." In that moment, something inside me hardened. Years of living in Marcus's shadow, of having my own talents dismissed, of being made to feel that my worth was tied to fulfilling my parents' dream rather than my own. It all crystallized into a resolve I hadn't known. I possessed. "Then I'll fail on my own terms." I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "But at least they'll be my terms, not yours." The argument reached its breaking point that night. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red as he stood up, pointed to the door, and delivered the ultimatum that would alter the course of my life. "If you choose this path, you are no longer welcome in this house. We did not sacrifice everything to raise a son who throws away his future on computer games. Either you return to proper studies, or you leave. Now." I looked to my mother, hoping for some intervention, but she stared down at her lap, tears falling onto her folded hands. The silence was her answer. "Fine," I said, pushing back from the table. "I'll go." The process of packing up my childhood was surreal. I moved methodically through my small bedroom, filling a duffel bag with essential clothing and toiletries. My laptop and external hard drive with all my design work went into my backpack, along with a few books and the framed photo of my grandmother, the only family member who had ever encouraged my creativity before she passed away. As I packed, I kept expecting someone to stop me, to suggest we talk more in the morning, when emotions weren't so high. That intervention never came. My father remained in the living room, staring stonily at the television. My mother hovered in the doorway of my room, occasionally making small, distressed sounds, but offering no solutions or comfort. The most painful moment came when I heard Marcus's voice. He had called to check in, as he did every few days, and my mother had immediately told him what was happening. She handed me the phone with a look of desperate hope, as if my brother could talk sense into me. "John, what are you doing?" Marcus sounded exhausted and irritated. "Just tell them what they want to hear. You can figure out the major stuff later." "I'm not going to lie anymore," I replied. "I'm done pretending to want something I don't." "So you're willing to tear apart the family over this?" Mom's crying. "Dad's blood pressure is probably through the roof. All because you want to draw pictures." His dismissal of my passion stung worse than my father's anger. "You, of all people, should understand what it's like to have your life planned out by someone else." There was a telling pause. "Sometimes we have to do what's expected of us, John. That's just life. Don't be selfish." I hung up without responding. That night, my own brother had chosen family expectation over supporting me. It was a betrayal I wouldn't forget for a long time. With nowhere specific to go, I called the only friend I thought might understand. Patrick, whom I had met in my design class. He lived off campus in a small apartment with 2 roommates, but offered me their couch until I figured out my next steps. I accepted his generosity with a mixture of gratitude and shame. That first night on Patrick's lumpy couch, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, the magnitude of what had happened hit me fully. I was 19 years old, essentially homeless, with just under $1,000 in savings and a partial scholarship that wouldn't cover full tuition, let alone living expenses. The panic that rose in my chest was suffocating. For one weak moment, I considered calling home apologizing and returning to the pre-med track. Instead, I opened my laptop and worked on a design project until dawn. If this path was going to cost me my family, I would make damn sure it was worth it. The following weeks were a crash course in adult responsibility. I met with the financial aid office to explain my situation and apply for additional loans and grants. I found a job as a barista at a campus coffee shop, working the early morning shift before classes. 3 evenings a week, I tutored high school students in math and science, subjects I excelled in, despite my lack of passion for them. On weekends, I picked up freelance design work, creating logos and simple websites for local businesses at rates far below market value, just to build my portfolio. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Most nights I collapsed into exhaustion around 2 in the morning, only to wake at 5 for my coffee shop shift. My diet consisted of whatever was cheapest at the grocery store or leftover pastries from the coffee shop. The physical toll was evident in the weight I lost and the dark circles that became permanent fixtures under my eyes. The emotional toll was harder to quantify, but even more devastating. Simple things would trigger waves of homesickness. The smell of my mother's signature dish, wafting from a restaurant, seeing fathers and sons walking together on campus, hearing conversations in my parents' native language. Each time I would be hit with a fresh wave of grief for the family support I had lost. One night, about 2 months after leaving home, the stress finally overwhelmed me. I was in the communal bathroom of the apartment building, having moved from Patrick's couch to sharing a tiny room with another student who needed help with rent. As I stood under the shower, the hot water ran out suddenly, a common occurrence in the old building. This small inconvenience, cold water hitting my exhausted body, broke something inside me. I slid down against the shower wall and sobbed silently, water mixing with tears, as I questioned every decision that had led me to this point. That moment of breakdown proved to be a turning point. After allowing myself that release, I dried off, returned to my shared room, and opened my design software. If I was going to suffer for this choice, I would make it count. I worked through the night on my final project for Gary's advanced design class, an intuitive interface for medical diagnostic software that incorporated elements of traditional healing symbols from various cultures, a subtle nod to the medical career I had rejected. The next morning, running on no sleep and too much coffee, I presented my project to the class. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before Gary spoke. "This is graduate-level work," he said simply. "See me after class." In his office, Gary didn't just praise my work. He offered me a research assistant position for the summer, working on a university project, developing accessible interfaces for educational software. The position came with a small stipend, and more importantly, access to campus housing during the break. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like I could catch my breath. "You're talented, John," Gary said, as I thanked him profusely. "But talent alone doesn't create success. It's the persistence you've shown these past months, working multiple jobs, maintaining your grades, and still producing exceptional design work. That tells me you're going to make it in this field." His confidence in me became a lifeline. On days when exhaustion made it hard to focus, when the loneliness of being cut off from family felt unbearable, I would remember his words and push forward. Slowly, I began to build a new support system. Classmates who respected my work, professors who recognized my potential, employers who valued my growing skills. Still, there were moments of doubt that no amount of external validation could erase. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet, I would sometimes wonder if my father was right. Was I throwing my life away? Would I end up regretting my choice to walk away from the secure, respected path of medicine? These questions haunted me, but each morning I would return to my design work, finding answers in the satisfaction of creation, rather than in endless second-guessing. By the beginning of my junior year, my persistence had begun to pay off. Gary recommended me for an internship at NeuralVision, a growing tech startup developing advanced AI interfaces. The company was small, but ambitious, founded by former Google engineers who believed AI should be accessible through intuitive, human-centered design. The interview process was rigorous. 4 rounds of technical assessments and design challenges. But my preparation and genuine passion for the field carried me through. When the offer letter arrived in my email, I printed it out and pinned it to my wall. Tangible proof that I was on the right path. The internship paid well enough that I could reduce my coffee shop hours to weekends, only giving me more time to focus on both my coursework and the internship projects. For the first time since leaving home, I began to feel financially stable. Neural Vision assigned me to their user experience team, where I was initially tasked with minor improvements to existing interfaces. I threw myself into the work, staying late to learn from senior designers and absorbing everything I could about the technical aspects of AI functionality. Within weeks, my supervisor noticed my dedication and began giving me more substantial responsibilities. The turning point came 3 months into the internship, when the team was struggling with a particularly challenging interface problem. The company's new medical diagnostic AI was powerful but so complex that healthcare professionals found it difficult to navigate. During a team meeting where everyone seemed stuck on solutions that merely patched the existing issues, I spoke up. What if we completely rethink the approach? I suggested, pulling up a rough prototype I had been working on during my free time. Instead of organizing information around the AI's processes, we could structure it around the way doctors actually think about diagnosis, moving from symptoms to potential causes, with clear visualizations of confidence levels for each possibility. The room fell silent as my prototype displayed on the main screen. Then the lead designer began asking questions, followed by the engineers, and finally, the CEO himself, who had stopped by the meeting. By the end of the hour, I was assigned to lead a small team to develop my concept into a full redesign of the product's interface. The project consumed the next 2 months of my life. I coordinated with engineers to ensure technical feasibility, interviewed medical professionals to refine the user flow, and personally designed each screen of the interface. When we finally launched the redesigned product, the feedback was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Usage metrics showed healthcare providers were diagnosing patients 30% faster with the new interface, with a significant increase in diagnostic accuracy. The success of the project led to an unexpected meeting with the company's founders. They offered me something I hadn't dared hope for, a full-time position upon graduation with a salary that made me blink twice to ensure I'd heard correctly. Additionally, they would provide tuition assistance for my final year of college. I accepted on the spot, barely maintaining my professional composure until I left the building, where I let out a whoop of joy that startled passers-by. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at an actual restaurant instead of my usual meal of ramen or peanut butter sandwiches. As I sat alone, savoring food I could now afford, I found myself wishing I could share this moment with my family. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted them to see that I hadn't failed, that I was finding my way on the path I had chosen. The thought of my family brought a familiar ache, but it was duller now, tempered by time and my growing success. I hadn't spoken to my parents since leaving home nearly 2 years earlier. Occasionally, I would check their social media pages to ensure they were okay, but I never reached out directly. The silence between us had grown from an acute pain to a chronic condition, always present, but manageable. News about Marcus came unexpectedly through a mutual family friend who was attending the same university. Lisa had bumped into me at a campus coffee shop, and after an awkward greeting, hesitantly mentioned that she had seen my brother recently. "He doesn't look good, John," she said, concern evident in her voice. "He's lost a lot of weight, and when I saw him at the library, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee." According to Lisa, Marcus was struggling in his medical program. The pressure of clinical rotations, combined with the rigorous academic requirements, had begun taking a serious toll. There were rumors of him showing up to rotations with alcohol on his breath, missing important exams, and being placed on academic probation. "Your parents don't talk about it," Lisa added. "They used to brag about him all the time, but now they change the subject whenever someone asks how he's doing." The news about Marcus left me with complicated feelings. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. The golden child was faltering while the disappointment was thriving. But that petty triumph was quickly overshadowed by genuine concern. I remembered how Marcus had looked during his brief visits home in my childhood, always tired, rarely smiling, moving through our house like a ghost before returning to his studies. Had he ever wanted to be a doctor, or had he simply been better at suppressing his own desires to meet our parents' expectations? The question haunted me in the weeks that followed. I considered reaching out to him, but hesitated, remembering his dismissal of my choices during our last conversation. The wound of his betrayal hadn't fully healed. Instead, I channeled my conflicted emotions into my work. At Neural Vision, I was given increasing responsibility, including mentoring new interns and contributing to product strategy discussions. My professors noticed the professional-level quality of my course projects and began treating me more like a colleague than a student. One even invited me to co-author a paper on emerging trends in AI interface design for a prestigious technology journal. The culmination of my academic success came with graduation. As I sat among my classmates in cap and gown, I scanned the audience out of habit, knowing logically that my family wouldn't be there, but feeling their absence acutely nonetheless. When my name was called, the cheers came from an unexpected corner. Gary, my first design professor and mentor, along with a group of my colleagues from Neural Vision, who had come to support me. As I moved the tassel on my cap from right to left, symbolizing my transition from student to graduate, I realized I had built something my 19-year-old self hadn't believed possible. A life entirely of my own making, successful by any objective measure, and true to who I really was. The family I had lost had been replaced by one I had chosen, people who valued me for my authentic self rather than for fulfilling predetermined expectations. That night, as my friends and colleagues celebrated with me, I received another piece of news about Marcus. A former classmate of his had joined our celebration, and after several drinks mentioned that Marcus had been removed from a clinical rotation after appearing disoriented and prescribing incorrect medications. The incident had triggered a mandatory drug test, which he had failed. Last I heard, he was taking a leave of absence, the classmate said, making air quotes. But everyone knows that's code for one step away from being kicked out completely. As the celebration continued around me, I stood apart for a moment, watching these people, who had become my new family. They had supported me through the hardest years of my life, celebrated my successes, and helped me find my way. Looking at them, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never allow bitterness about my blood family to poison what I was building. I would succeed not to prove my parents wrong, but because this path was genuinely right for me. Following graduation, my career at Neural Vision accelerated rapidly. Within 6 months, I was promoted to lead designer, overseeing a team of 5, and reporting directly to the chief product officer. The company was gaining recognition in the tech industry for our innovative approaches to AI interaction, and my redesigned medical interface had become our flagship product, adopted by several major hospital systems across the country. Despite my professional success, I felt a growing restlessness. While I loved the work I was doing, I began to see limitations in how the company approached certain problems. During late-night conversations with 2 colleagues, Ryan, a brilliant AI engineer, and Alicia, a cognitive psychologist who specialized in human-computer interaction, we found ourselves consistently returning to a shared vision of what AI interfaces could become. The problem with current systems, Ryan explained, during one of our unofficial strategy sessions at a local bar, is that they're still designed with the computer's architecture in mind, not the human mind. Exactly, I agreed. We're making users adapt to the system when the system should adapt to them. Alicia, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. What if we created interfaces that evolved based on how each individual user thinks, not just remembering preferences, but actually learning cognitive patterns and adapting in real time? That conversation planted the seed for what would become IntelliDesign, our own startup company. For 6 months, we continued working at Neural Vision during the day while developing our business plan and initial prototypes at night. We secured a small investment from an angel investor who had worked with Ryan previously enough to give us runway for 1 year of operations. Then, in a move that terrified and exhilarated me equally, we all resigned from our secure jobs to pursue our vision full-time. The early days of IntelliDesign were reminiscent of my first months after leaving home. Long hours, financial uncertainty, and moments of paralyzing doubt. We converted Ryan's garage into our office, working from folding tables, and living primarily on coffee and takeout. But unlike those difficult days of my youth, I now had partners who shared both the burden and the vision. When one of us faltered, the others provided strength and perspective. Our first product was an adaptive design platform that allowed digital interfaces to evolve based on user behavior. The system would analyze how individuals navigated applications, identifying patterns and friction points, then automatically adjust the interface to better match their natural thought processes. We called it Morpheus after the Greek god of dreams because it shaped itself to the user's mental model rather than forcing conformity. The breakthrough came 9 months into our venture, when we demonstrated Morpheus at TechCrunch Disrupt, a prestigious startup competition. Our presentation went viral within the tech community, leading to a flurry of media coverage and, more importantly, interest from major investors. Within weeks, we had secured $5 million in Series A funding, with a valuation that exceeded our wildest expectations. As IntelliDesign grew from 3 founders in a garage to a company of 30 employees in actual office space, my role evolved as well. Though I had never envisioned myself as a CEO, my combined understanding of design technology and business strategy made me the natural choice to lead the company. I found myself making decisions that would affect not just my own future, but the livelihoods of everyone who had chosen to join our team. The weight of this responsibility was simultaneously terrifying and empowering. Each time I faced a difficult decision, I thought back to that pivotal moment when I had chosen my own path, despite the consequences. That choice had taught me to trust my instincts while remaining open to input from those with different perspectives, a balance that served me well as a leader. 3 years after founding IntelliDesign, we launched our most ambitious product yet, an AI-powered design system that could generate intuitive interfaces based on verbal descriptions of functionality. The technology revolutionized application development, allowing non-technical clients to create sophisticated software without needing to understand code or design principles. Major corporations began licensing our technology, and our valuation soared to over $100 million. With financial security firmly established, I purchased my first home, a modern house overlooking the city where I had once wandered homeless after being kicked out by my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me as I signed the mortgage papers. In 7 years, I had gone from sleeping on a friend's couch to becoming a homeowner and the CEO of a successful tech company. The 19-year-old who had left home with nothing but a duffel bag and a laptop would hardly recognize the life I had built. As I settled into my new home, news about Marcus reached me through increasingly alarming channels. A former medical school classmate, who now worked with our healthcare clients, mentioned encountering him at a rehabilitation facility. He was checking in for his 3rd attempt at recovery, she told me discreetly. I almost didn't recognize him. According to her, Marcus had been dismissed from his residency program after multiple incidents involving substance abuse. What had begun as using stimulants to cope with the demanding schedule had escalated to dependency on more dangerous drugs. His medical license had been suspended pending completion of a substance abuse program and psychiatric evaluation. The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite years of distance, Marcus was still my brother, and the thought of his suffering brought me no satisfaction. I found myself wondering how our parents were handling his downfall. The son who was supposed to fulfill all their dreams now, stripped of his medical career and struggling with addiction. I received my answer unexpectedly, through a business associate who belonged to the same cultural community as my parents. During a dinner meeting, he mentioned knowing my family without realizing the estrangement. "It is such a shame about your brother," he said. "Your parents have become quite isolated. They used to be fixtures at community events, always talking about their doctor's son. Now they rarely attend anything. People say your father's health has declined significantly from the stress." The conversation left me unsettled. I had imagined my parents continuing their lives as before, perhaps transferring all their expectations and pride to Marcus's children once he became an established physician. The reality, that they were facing their own form of social exile due to his public failure, hadn't occurred to me. That night, I found myself looking at old family photos I had kept stored in a folder on my computer. Images of birthdays, cultural celebrations, and ordinary moments captured before the fracture in our family. In one photo, Marcus stood with his arm around my shoulders at his high school graduation, both of us smiling genuinely. Before the pressure of medical school had changed him, before my decision had severed our family bonds. For a brief moment, I considered reaching out, not to reconcile necessarily, but simply to check on them. My finger hovered over my father's contact information, still saved in my phone after all these years. But ultimately, I closed the photo folder without making the call. The wounds were too deep, the silence too prolonged. If reconciliation was to happen, it would need to begin with acknowledgement from their side that my path had been valid. Instead, I channeled my complicated emotions into expanding IntelliDesign's philanthropic initiatives. We established a scholarship program for underprivileged students pursuing careers in technology and design, with a special focus on those whose families didn't support their chosen field. It wasn't a direct response to my family situation, but it was a way of creating something positive from my own painful experience. As IntelliDesign continued to grow, I found myself featured in technology magazines and invited to speak at major conferences. Each public appearance increased the likelihood that news of my success would reach my parents, but no contact came. I had built my life, without them achieving the success they had always wanted for me, just through a different path than they had envisioned. The irony was striking. Their doctor son had failed, while the son they had rejected was thriving. Yet success, I was learning, didn't heal all wounds. Late at night in the quiet of my beautiful new home, I sometimes still felt the ache of family ties severed. Professional achievements and financial security couldn't replace the fundamental human need for familial connection. I had created a new family of friends and colleagues who valued me for who I truly was, but the absence of my blood relatives remained a quiet, persistent pain. I never expected that pain to be addressed until the day my assistant interrupted a meeting with news that would reopen everything I thought had been closed. "John, your mother is in the reception area. She says she needs to see you urgently." The conference room suddenly felt airless. My executive team looked at me with concern, as I struggled to maintain my professional composure. 7 years had passed since I had seen or spoken to my mother. 7 years of building a life without family, of healing from rejection, of proving my worth through my own definition of success rather than theirs. "Take 10 minutes, Ryan said quietly. "We can continue the quarterly review when you're ready." I nodded gratefully and headed to the reception area, my mind racing. What could possibly have brought my mother to my office after all this time? Had something happened to my father, to Marcus, or had news of IntelliDesign's recent acquisition of a major competitor finally penetrated their awareness? The woman waiting in our sleek reception area barely resembled the mother I remembered. She had aged dramatically, her once black hair now streaked with gray, her posture stooped as if bearing an invisible weight. When she saw me, she stood, her hands clutching a worn purse. "John," she said, her voice catching. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, 7 years of silence stretching between us like an unbridgeable chasm. "Let's talk in my office," I finally said, gesturing toward the private elevator. She followed silently, her eyes taking in the modern office space with its awards and recognitions displayed in the reception area, tangible proof of the success she had never witnessed. Once in my office, I offered her a seat and water, maintaining the formal politeness one might extend to any unexpected visitor. I didn't sit behind my desk, that would create too much distance, but chose an adjacent chair close enough for conversation but not intimacy. "You have done well," she said, looking around at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Your company, it is in the news sometimes. Your father notices the articles, but never says anything." I waited, saying nothing. After 7 years, she would need to explain her presence without prompting from me. The silence stretched until tears began streaming down her face. "I am sorry, John. We were wrong. So wrong." The words seemed physically painful for her to speak. "We should have supported your choice. We should have trusted you to know your own path." Had these words come years earlier, they might have healed the wound instantly. Now they were like rain on parched earth, necessary, but insufficient to immediately restore what had withered. "Why now?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. She looked down at her hands. "We need your help. Your father is ill. Heart problems, the medical bills. We have no insurance that covers everything he needs. Marcus was supposed to help to take care of us as we aged. That was the plan. But now," she went on to explain what I had already pieced together from various sources. Marcus had completely self-destructed. After being dismissed from his residency program, he had spiraled deeper into addiction. My parents had spent their retirement savings and remortgaged their home trying to save him, paying for expensive rehabilitation programs, legal fees for drug-related charges, and eventually a stay at a private mental health facility, when he had attempted suicide. "We have nothing left," she admitted. "Your father cannot work anymore. His heart, the doctor says he needs surgery, but we cannot afford it. I clean houses again like when we first came to this country, but it is not enough." The irony was almost too perfect. They had rejected me for choosing a path they believed would lead to failure, only to now seek financial rescue from the very success they had dismissed. Part of me, the wounded 19-year-old who still lived somewhere in my consciousness, wanted to savor this moment of vindication. But the man I had become couldn't take pleasure in their suffering. "Where is Marcus now?" I asked. "In a halfway house. He is 6 months sober this time." There was fragile hope in her voice. "He works at a medical records office. Not as a doctor, of course, but it is honest work." I nodded, processing everything. "And Dad? How is he handling all of this?" Her expression told me everything before she spoke. "He is angry, depressed. The dream he had for our family is gone. When the community talks about Marcus now, it is with pity, not pride." "Does he know you're here?" I already suspected the answer. "No," she admitted. "He is too proud. But we will lose the house next month if something doesn't change." I suggested meeting for lunch the following day, needing time to process this unexpected reunion and her request. She agreed, the relief evident in her expression. She had expected immediate rejection. After she left, I canceled my remaining meetings and went home early, something I rarely did. Sitting on my balcony overlooking the city, I tried to sort through the tangle of emotions her visit had provoked. There was anger at the transparent nature of her apology, coming only when they needed something from me. There was lingering hurt from years of rejection. But there was also a surprising surge of compassion, remembering how hard my parents had worked all their lives, how completely they had believed that their sacrifices would be rewarded through their children's success. The next day, I met my mother at a quiet restaurant near my office. She arrived early, dressed in what I recognized as her best outfit, the same one she had worn to Marcus's medical school graduation years ago. The realization pierced me. She had so little now that she was still wearing clothes from 7 years ago for important occasions. "I've been thinking about your situation," I began after we had ordered. "I'm willing to help with Dad's medical expenses." The relief that flooded her face made her look momentarily younger. "Thank you, John. Thank you. Your father will be so grateful." "I have conditions." I continued, my voice firm. "I won't give money directly to you or Dad. I'll pay the hospital and doctors directly. And this isn't a reconciliation. It's help for a medical emergency. I need that to be clear." She nodded, disappointment evident despite her gratitude. "I understand, but perhaps with time." "Perhaps," I said, not wanting to close the door entirely, but needing to establish boundaries. "Is Dad willing to see me at all?" She hesitated. "He knows things must change. If you came to the house..." We arranged a meeting for the weekend. As I drove to my childhood home that Saturday, anxiety tightened my chest. The modest house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling in places, the garden my mother had once tended, with pride now reduced to a few hardy plants struggling amid weeds. My father opened the door before I could knock. 7 years had transformed him from an imposing figure to an old man. His hair was completely white. Now his powerful frame diminished, his eyes sunken behind his glasses. We regarded each other for a long moment before he stepped back silently to let me enter. The conversation was stilted at first, focused on safe topics: the weather changes in the neighborhood, the new light rail system being built nearby. Eventually, after my mother served tea in the good cups reserved for special guests, my father cleared his throat. "Your mother says you will help with the medical bills." His voice was gruff pride battling with necessity. "Yes," I replied simply. He nodded once. "Thank you." The words seemed to cost him physically. "Your company," he continued after a moment. "It is doing well." "Very well," I confirmed. "We employ over 100 people now. Our technology is used by major corporations worldwide." A flicker of something, pride, regret, crossed his face. I did not understand what you were doing. With computers, it seemed like games to me. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. The world changed, Dad. Technology changed everything. Yes. He looked down at his hands, once strong and capable, now trembling slightly. The world changed, and I did not change with it. The conversation gradually became less strained, as we carefully navigated 7 years of absence. He spoke of his health problems of the community that had slowly distanced themselves, as Marcus's troubles became public knowledge of the financial disaster that had consumed their retirement savings. I shared selective details about my company's growth, my recent purchase of a home, my plans for future innovation. What remained unspoken was the fundamental breach between us, his rejection of my chosen path, my decision to build a life without them, the years of silence that could never be erased. It hovered in the room like an additional presence, acknowledged but not directly addressed. As I was preparing to leave, my phone rang. It was Marcus. My mother had apparently told him about our reunion and given him my number. I stepped outside to take the call, hearing my brother's voice for the first time in years. John. His voice was different, hoarser, less confident than I remembered. Mom said you're helping with Dad's surgery. Yes, I confirmed, unsure what else to say to this stranger who shared my blood. That's good of you. After everything. He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. I should have stood up for you back then. I knew. I always knew I wasn't meant to be a doctor. But I couldn't admit it couldn't disappoint them. So I let them throw you away instead. His raw honesty caught me off guard. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've learned in recovery that you can't move forward without facing the truth about your past. And the truth is, I failed you as a brother. I was jealous of your courage to choose your own path when I couldn't find mine. His words opened something in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a crack in the wall I had built around the pain of his betrayal. It wasn't courage at first, I admitted. It was just survival. I couldn't live someone else's dream anymore. Well, it looks like your dream worked out better than theirs did for me. There was no bitterness in his tone, just tired acceptance. We spoke for nearly an hour, Marcus telling me about his recovery journey, the daily struggle to rebuild a life from the wreckage of his failed medical career. He was working as an administrator in a medical records department, using his knowledge of medical terminology, but without the pressure of holding lives in his hands. I'm actually okay with it, he said, surprising me. For the first time I wake up not dreading the day ahead. That's worth something. As we ended the call, he asked hesitantly if we could meet sometime. I agreed, though, with the same boundaries I had established with my parents. Reconciliation, if it came, would be a slow process built on new foundations, not a return to old patterns. Driving back to my home that evening, I realized that the family who had once rejected me was now seeking my help, not just financially, but in redefining who they were, after their carefully constructed identities had collapsed. The dutiful son, the successful doctor, the proud parents of a physician, all those roles had disintegrated, leaving them adrift. The question I faced was whether I wanted to be part of whatever new family structure might emerge from the ruins of the old one. Did I owe them that chance, after they had denied me the same acceptance I was now considering extending to them? The anger that had sustained me for years had faded, but in its place was something more complicated. A cautious, conditional compassion that acknowledged our shared humanity without forgetting the wounds of the past. In the months that followed that initial reunion, I established clear boundaries with my family. I arranged for my father's medical care, paying the hospital directly rather than giving money to my parents. The surgery was successful, and his recovery, while slow, progressed steadily. I visited occasionally, but maintained my separate life, unwilling to sacrifice the independence I had fought so hard to achieve. Rather than simply becoming my family's financial safety net, I created a more sustainable solution. After consulting with financial advisors, I established a modest healthcare fund for my parents that would cover ongoing medical needs without enabling dependence. The structure required them to make reasonable contributions based on their income, maintaining their dignity while ensuring they wouldn't face medical bankruptcy again. You could just give us money directly, my father pointed out during one of my visits, a hint of his old authoritarian tone creeping in. We are your parents. This isn't about whether you're my parents, I replied calmly. It's about creating a solution that works long-term without recreating unhealthy patterns. My mother, more perceptive about the dynamics at play, touched his arm gently. John is right. We need to stand on our own feet as much as possible. That moment illustrated the subtle shift occurring in our family. My mother acknowledging my perspective as valid, my father struggling with the reversal of authority, but slowly accepting the new reality. It wasn't the warm reconciliation depicted in sentimental movies, but it was honest, and that honesty felt more valuable than false harmony. Beyond the practical help for my immediate family, I found myself drawn to create something more meaningful from my experience. The scholarship program at IntelliDesign had already been supporting students pursuing technology careers despite family opposition, but I expanded it significantly, creating a comprehensive initiative called Divergent Paths. The program didn't just provide financial support but matched students with mentors who had navigated similar challenges and offered counseling services for those struggling with family pressure or rejection. We created community spaces where these students could find peer support and build new networks to replace the family connections they might have lost. You've turned your pain into purpose, Gary observed when I invited him to join the program's advisory board. My first design professor had remained a trusted mentor throughout my career, and his perspective still mattered deeply to me. It felt like the only way forward, I admitted. Either let the experience define me through bitterness, or transform it into something constructive. As the program grew, I began receiving messages from students whose stories echoed my own. Brilliant young people, pressured to pursue prestigious but unsuitable careers, struggling with the tension between familial expectations and personal authenticity. Their gratitude for finding a community that understood their experience was both healing and humbling. 6 months after our initial reunion, Marcus reached out about meeting for coffee. He had maintained his sobriety and recently been promoted at the medical administration company where he worked. When we met at a quiet cafe near his apartment, I was struck by how different he looked from both the golden child of our youth and the failing medical student I had heard about during our years apart. There was a calmness to him now, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with status or achievement. I'm thinking about getting certified in healthcare information management, he told me. It's a good field growing with all the digital record systems. And it suits me. I understand the medical terminology without having to deal directly with patients. That sounds perfect for you, I said, genuinely pleased at how he had found an adjacent path that utilized his knowledge without the pressure that had crushed him. I never would have found it if I hadn't hit bottom, he admitted. Losing everything forced me to figure out who I actually am, not who I was supposed to be. We shared a moment of understanding that transcended the years of separation. Both of us had taken different routes to the same essential truth, that authentic success could only come from alignment with one's true self, not from fulfilling others' expectations. As our relationship cautiously rebuilt, Marcus became an unexpected ally in establishing healthier family dynamics. When our father occasionally slipped into old patterns of judgment or control, Marcus would gently redirect the conversation. His experience in recovery groups had given him tools for communication that proved valuable in our family's healing process. The hardest thing, he told me during one of our increasingly regular conversations, is accepting that Mom and Dad did the best they could with the understanding they had. Their definition of love was providing security and status, not nurturing individuality. Understanding doesn't erase the harm, though, I pointed out. No, he agreed, but it helps me separate their actions from my worth. Their inability to see a different path doesn't mean that path isn't valuable. His insight struck me deeply. For years, I had measured my success partly as vindication against my parents' rejection. But true freedom would mean defining success entirely on my own terms, independent of either their approval or disapproval. This realization led to a pivotal conversation with my parents almost a year after our reunion. We were having dinner at my home, a neutral territory that symbolized my independent success while allowing for family connection. I need you to understand something, I said as we finished the meal. I'm helping because I choose to, not because I'm seeking your approval now. My life and career are valid whether you fully understand them or not. My father looked ready to object, but my mother placed her hand over his. We know that now, she said quietly. Your success speaks for itself. But more than that, we see that you are content in a way Marcus never was when he was following our path. My father nodded slowly. In our country, in our time, security came from certain professions. Doctor, lawyer, engineer. We did not understand that the world had changed, that new paths could provide not just security but fulfillment. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it acknowledged the fundamental flaw in their approach, confusing security with happiness, status with success. For the first time, I felt fully seen by them, not as the son who had rejected their dreams, but as a man who had created his own. As IntelliDesign continued to thrive, I found my definition of success expanding beyond professional achievements. The company's value had grown exponentially, with our latest innovations and industry publications regularly featured our work. But increasingly, I measured success by different metrics. The students supported through our scholarship program, the healthy boundaries I maintained in all relationships, the authentic joy I found in creating technology that genuinely improved people's lives. The most profound change came in how I viewed my own story. What had once been primarily a narrative of rejection and vindication transformed into something more nuanced. A journey of self-discovery and authentic creation. The pain of family estrangement had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. It was simply one chapter in a longer story of building a life aligned with my true nature. This perspective allowed me to approach family gatherings with a new equanimity. When relatives who had once judged my career choice now asked for introductions to tech industry contacts for their children, I responded with grace rather than resentment. When community members who had witnessed my family's rejection now approached with belated congratulations on my success, I accepted their words without needing to point out their previous silence. "You seem at peace," Marcus observed during a weekend hike, an activity we had recently begun sharing, even with all the complicated family stuff. I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm no longer looking for validation from sources that can't provide it. "That's the real success story," he said thoughtfully. "Not the company valuation or the industry awards." He was right. The true measure of my journey wasn't that I had proven my parents wrong about my career choice. It was that I had discovered the courage to live authentically, to create boundaries that protected that authenticity, and to extend compassion without compromising my truth. The final piece of this understanding came unexpectedly during a mentoring session with a young designer in our scholarship program. She was brilliantly talented, but struggling with her family's disapproval of her creative career. "How did you stop caring what they think?" she asked me, frustration evident in her voice. "I didn't," I admitted, the realization clarifying as I spoke. "That's not the goal. The goal is to care about your own truth more than you care about their approval. To love yourself enough to choose your authentic path, even when that choice comes with pain." Her expression told me the words had landed exactly where she needed them. And in articulating this for her, I had finally captured the essence of my own journey. Not a rejection of family, but an embrace of self. Not an absence of pain, but a willingness to bear that pain in service of something more important, living truthfully. As my story spread through our scholarship program, and occasionally in industry talks, I received messages from young people facing similar crossroads. Some had already left family expectations behind, others were contemplating that difficult choice, and still others were seeking ways to bridge the gap between their dreams and their family's understanding. To each of them, I offered not a simple solution, but the complex truth I had lived, that the path of authenticity is rarely easy, but ultimately necessary. That success built on self-betrayal is no success at all. That family bonds can be honored without sacrificing personal truth. And that sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and eventually for those who have hurt you, is to say no to expectations that would diminish your spirit. 7 years after being kicked out of my childhood home, I had built not just a successful company, but a life of integrity. The journey from rejection to self-creation had taught me that true freedom comes not from proving others wrong, but from the courage to live right, aligned with your deepest values, responsive to your authentic gifts, and committed to creating rather than reacting. Sometimes the most important word in the journey to yourself is no. And sometimes the most powerful response to those who once rejected you is not anger or vindication, but the quiet dignity of living well on your own terms. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your true passion? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming family rejection to find success. Remember that your path is valid even when others can't understand it. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to honor your authentic self, whatever that might mean in your own life.